The Free Thinker Show. Ignite your mind, challenge the norm.
All right, buckle up, because today we're diving into the world of conspiracy theories.
Oh, you know I love a good conspiracy theory.
Who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
But specifically, we're talking about the ones that turned out to be totally true.
The ones that make you go, wait, they were right.
Exactly. And we've got some wild ones lined up, from big pharma cover-ups to, well, you'll see.
Let's get right into it.
So first up, the opioid crisis.
Yeah, this one hits close to home for a lot of people.
For years, we were told big pharma had no idea how addictive these painkillers were.
But then those documents from Purdue Pharma, the makers of OxyContin, started coming out.
And let me tell you, those documents were a game changer.
They really were. It became clear that Purdue was running a massive misinformation campaign, downplaying just how addictive OxyContin could be.
Their own emails told the whole story.
Like that one from 1997, where Purdue's head of sales, Michael Friedman, emailed Dr. Richard Sackler.
Okay, and what did he say?
Well, Friedman was worried because doctors were starting to realize that OxyContin was even stronger than morphine.
You'd think that would be a red flag, right?
You'd think. But Friedman was more worried about sales taking a hit.
Of course.
He actually wrote, it would be extremely dangerous at this early stage in the life of the product to make physicians think the drug is stronger or equal to morphine.
Dangerous for their profits, maybe?
Exactly. And the worst part, Sackler replied with, I agree with you.
They do?
They knew. They knew how addictive it was, but kept pushing it anyway.
And it gets worse, right? There was that other email exchange between Sackler and, what was his name? Michael Cullen.
Oh, yeah, Cullen. They were basically strategizing about how to avoid any language that made OxyContin seem weaker than other opioids.
Vicky.
Totally calculated. They wanted doctors to think it was a safer option, so they would prescribe it more.
And they spent years silencing anyone who tried to speak out, paying out those huge settlements.
Millions and millions of dollars to keep it all under wraps.
But finally, in 2020, it all caught up with them.
Yep. Purdue Pharma pled guilty to conspiracy and fraud.
And the U.S. attorney at the time, Rachel Honig, she said it best.
What'd she say?
She said, Purdue admitted to marketing dangerous opioids even when they knew they were being diverted to abusers. They lied, they defrauded, and people paid the price.
Powerful words. And a stark reminder that corporate greed can have devastating consequences. And speaking of corporate greed, this next deep dive takes a turn for the faith.
Well, let's just say it's not what you'd expect.
Oh, this is the Hobby Lobby one, right?
Got it. Get ready for a wild ride.
Hobby Lobby, the craft store. What could they possibly be caught up in?
It all started with their plan to build a Bible museum.
Sounds harmless enough.
Right. But here's where it gets interesting. To fill this museum, they went on a bit of an artifact shopping spree.
Like ancient artifacts.
Oh, yeah, the real deal. In 2010, they bought over 5,000 artifacts from Iraq.
5,000? What kind of artifacts are we talking about here?
We're talking ancient cuneiform tablets, those clay tablets with the wedge-shaped writing.
I've seen those in museums.
Exactly. Plus clay seals and all sorts of other historical treasures.
Okay, but people buy and sell artifacts all the time. What's the big deal? True. But there are laws in place to prevent the looting and trafficking of culturally significant items, especially from countries like Iraq.
I see where this is going.
And Hobby Lobby, well, let's just say they weren't exactly subtle.
Give me the details.
First of all, their own expert warned them that the artifacts looked like they might have been looted. Told them the paperwork was fishy.
And they went ahead with it anyway.
Full steam ahead. Then, instead of shipping everything to their headquarters, they sent the packages to 3 different Hobby Lobby addresses.
Trying to keep it on the down low.
You know it. And get this, they labeled the packages as ceramic tiles.
Ceramic tiles.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yep. And claimed they were only worth a few $100 each.
Oh, come on. I bet customs officials saw right through that.
Of course they did. Turns out, a lot of those artifacts were probably stolen from the National Museum of Iraq. Oops.
Oops is right. So what happened?
Hobby Lobby had to forfeit everything and pay a $3 million fine.
$3 million. That's gotta hurt.
You'd think they would learn their lesson, right?
You would think. That's quite the story. Who knew a craft store could be so scandalous?
Well, get ready for more because we've got a lot more to uncover today.
I'm ready. Hit me with it. All right, get ready for this one because it involves astrology, the White House, and some seriously powerful figures.
We're diving into the story of Nancy Reagan and her astrologer, Joan Quigley.
Okay, I've heard whispers about this one, but I'm ready for the full story.
It's a wild one. So both Ronald and Nancy Reagan had expressed interest in astrology before, even reading their horoscopes together.
Really? I had no idea.
Oh, yeah. But after the assassination attempt on President Reagan in 1981, Nancy's interest intensified. Big time.
Understandably so. I can't even imagine what that must have been like for her.
Exactly. She wanted to do everything in her power to protect her husband, and that's where Joan Quigley comes in.
Okay, so who exactly is Joan Quigley?
She was a San Francisco astrologer who became incredibly close with Nancy Reagan.
Incredibly close how?
Well, Don Regan, who was the White House chief of staff at the time, wrote in his memoir that Quigley had a major influence on the Reagan schedules.
Wait, seriously? Like she was influencing presidential decisions based on the stars?
That's what Reagan claimed. He described a color-coded calendar based on Quigley's astrological readings, green for good days, red for days, to avoid making any big decisions or public appearances.
Hold on, so you're telling me that things like international summits and speeches were being planned around the alignment of the planets?
It's hard to say for sure how much influence she actually had, but those claims are out there.
That's wild. You'd think something like that would be front-page news.
You'd think, right. But Nancy Reagan went to great lengths to keep Quigley's involvement under wraps, especially once word started to get out.
Makes you wonder what else goes on behind those closed doors in Washington.
Right. And the thing is, Quigley herself wasn't shy about taking credit for her supposed influence.
She actually admitted to it.
Oh, yeah. In her own memoir, she claimed to have influenced everything from trade negotiations to U.S.-Soviet relations.
Wow. Just wow. Whether it's true or not, it definitely makes you think twice about what really goes on behind the scenes of major political events.
Absolutely. And speaking of things that make you think twice, remember those times when your phone starts acting up right before a new model comes out?
Oh, you mean like when it gets super slow and the battery drains in like 5 minutes?
Exactly. It's almost like clockwork.
It's beyond frustrating. And it always seems to happen right when the newest, shiniest model is released.
It makes you wonder, right? Is it just a coincidence, or is there something more calculated going on?
I've always had my suspicions about that.
Well, it's called planned obsolescence, and it's a conspiracy theory that has been swirling around for years.
Planned obsolescence. Tell me more.
Essentially, it's the idea that companies intentionally design products to become obsolete or unusable after a certain amount of time, forcing consumers to buy new ones.
That sounds incredibly shady.
Yeah.
But do they actually do that?
There's been a lot of debate about it, but some pretty compelling cases suggest it's more than just a theory.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, remember back in 2017 when Apple admitted to slowing down older iPhones?
Oh, yeah. That was huge. People were outraged.
And for good reason. Apple claimed they were doing it to preserve battery life on older models.
Which, okay, I get it. Batteries degrade over time.
Right. But the timing of it all was a little too coincidental for some people.
It did seem very convenient that it happened right when the new iPhone models were released.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of parts pairing, which a lot of people don't even know about.
Parts pairing. What is that?
Basically, it means that certain parts, like screens or batteries, are linked to specific devices, and you can't just swap them out with any replacement part.
So you're saying if my iPhone screen breaks, I can't just buy a new screen and fix it myself?
Well, you could try, but chances are it either won't work or you'll get an error message saying the part isn't compatible.
That's ridiculous. It's like they're holding our devices hostage.
That's the argument a lot of people make. And Elizabeth Chamberlain from iFixit, which is an organization that advocates for repair rights, summed it up perfectly.
What does she say?
She said that if you take two perfectly working iPhones and try to swap the screens, they either won't turn on or you'll get an error message saying the parts aren't compatible.
So what's the point of doing that, other than just being annoying?
Well, critics argue that it gives companies more control over repairs and encourages consumers to just buy new devices instead of repairing their old ones.
It's all about keeping us on that consumer treadmill, isn't it? Buy, use, break, repeat.
Exactly. And this next deep dive flips the script on a tactic that's often used to discredit social movements, the accusation of paid protesters.
Oh, you mean like when people claim that protesters are just in it for the money and don't actually care about the cause?
Exactly. It's a way to discredit their message and make it seem like the whole movement is manufactured.
I've definitely seen that tactic used before.
It's a classic. But here's where it gets interesting sometimes. Those accusations of paid protesters are coming from the very people doing the paying.
Wait, what? That's messed up.
It is. There have actually been instances where governments or organizations with a vested interest have been caught infiltrating protest groups or even paying people to stir up trouble.
Seriously, do you have any examples of that?
Sure. One example is the FBI's history of infiltrating protest groups, like during the Dakota Access Pipeline protests at Standing Rock.
Oh, wow. I remember those protests. They were huge.
Exactly. And it turns out the FBI was involved behind the scenes.
What were they doing?
Well, they were accused of using informants to gather intelligence on the protesters and potentially even incite violence or disruption.
Wow. That's really unsettling.
And it's not just a U.S. phenomenon either. British police have been caught offering money to informants within activist groups.
So it's like a way to control the narrative to make the protesters look bad.
Exactly. And the irony is, by crying paid protesters, they're actually fueling the very thing they claim to be against.
It's like they're projecting their own tactics onto the other side.
Exactly. And it often backfires because it exposes the lengths they're willing to go to in order to silence dissent.
Which in turn can actually make the movement they're trying to discredit seem even more credible.
It's true. And it brings us to another example where what was once dismissed as a conspiracy theory has become impossible to ignore: foreign interference in elections.
Oh yeah, this is a big one. Remember back during the 2016 U.S. election when people were talking about Russia interfering?
Right. And at the time, it sounded like something out of a spy movie.
Totally. Like, no way that could actually be happening.
But then more information started coming out, and that 2018 Senate report was pretty damning.
What did it say?
It confirmed that Russia had been using social media to spread disinformation and manipulate voters during the 2016 election.
So it was true. They were trying to influence our election.
They were, and they haven't stopped. In fact, they've only gotten more sophisticated and strategic since then.
What are they doing now?
Well, for one, they're focusing on exploiting existing divisions within society. Like recently, they've been pushing a lot of misinformation about immigration and the U.S.-Mexico border.
It's like they're trying to sow chaos and distrust.
Exactly. They're experts at tapping into anxieties and fears and then amplifying them through carefully crafted narratives.
And it's not just the U.S. they're targeting, right? I've heard they're doing this in other countries too.
Oh, absolutely. They've been targeting elections all over the world. Like, there's this doppelganger campaign that's been identified recently where they're flooding European social media with fake accounts and misleading information.
It's like a whole new era of information warfare.
It really is. And it raises so many questions about how we navigate truth and fiction in the digital age, especially when it comes to something as important as elections.
All right, hold on tight because this next one is a wild ride. We're talking CIA, we're talking animals, we're talking espionage.
Get ready for the fascinating world of animal spies.
Animal spies, is that even a real thing?
Oh, it's real. And unlike the whole birds aren't real thing, which is obviously a joke.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that birds are in fact real.
Right. But governments, especially the CIA, have a long history of using animals for espionage purposes.
No way, seriously. Like, what kind of animals are we talking about here?
Well, back in the 1960s, the CIA tried to train cats to be spies.
Hold on, cats, as in, like, house cats.
The very same. They called it Operation Acoustic Kitty.
Operation Acoustic Kitty? Okay, you've got to be kidding me. Tell me more.
So the plan was to implant microphones and transmitters in cats and then send them into Soviet embassies and other sensitive locations to eavesdrop on conversations.
I can already see where this is going.
It didn't go well. In one of their first tests, they implanted a microphone in a cat's ear canal, a transmitter at the base of its skull, and sent it out on a mission.
And did the kitty cat come back with the intel?
It was hit by a taxi.
Oh no, poor kitty. But also, I can't say I'm surprised. Cats are notoriously independent creatures.
Right. They're not exactly known for following orders.
You'd think dogs would be a better fit for the job.
You'd think. But they actually had more success with pigeons. During the Cold War, the CIA used pigeons equipped with cameras to take aerial photographs.
Pigeon surveillance. That's actually pretty clever.
It is. They even tried to train a raven to plant bugs.
A raven. Now that's just awesome. Did it work?
Not as well as they'd hoped. Apparently, ravens are a bit too smart for their own good and kept getting distracted.
Okay, so we've got cats, pigeons, ravens. Any other animal agents we should know about?
Believe it or not, they even built robotic catfish.
Robotic catfish. Come on, you're making this up.
Nope, it's true. They called them Charlie and Charlene, and they were designed to collect water samples discreetly.
Of course, they named them Charlie and Charlene. Only the CIA. So what happened to the robotic fish? Were they successful?
Let's just say that underwater espionage is trickier than it sounds.
Fair enough. Any other animal spies up your sleeve?
One more for you. The Insectothoctor, a dragonfly drone designed for eavesdropping.
A dragonfly drone. That's some next-level spy tech right there.
It was a brilliant idea except for one major flaw.
Wind. Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Wind. The ultimate enemy of all things airborne.
Exactly. Let's just say those missions didn't always go according to plan.
Well, there you have it. The CIA. Masters of turning animals into secret agents with varying degrees of success.
It just goes to show that sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction.
Absolutely. And with that, let's take a quick break, and then we'll be back with the final part of our deep dive into conspiracy theories that turn out to be true. All right, from spy cats and robotic fish to, well, this next one takes us to, I guess you could say, the granddaddy of all conspiracy theories.
Roswell.
1947, New Mexico desert, mysterious crash. It's the story that launched 1,000, alien enthusiasts and sparked conspiracy theories that are still going strong today.
And for years, the government insisted it was just a weather balloon. Oh, yeah, that's what they said.
But come on, did anyone actually believe that?
Well, the truth, it wasn't aliens.
Okay, good to know.
But it wasn't a weather balloon either.
All right, so what was it then? What
Yeah.
really crashed in the desert that day?
It was all part of a top-secret project called Project Mogul.
Project Mogul. Okay, never heard of it.
It was a Cold War thing. Basically, they were sending up these huge balloons with all kinds of radar equipment to,
To spy on the Soviets.
Exactly. They were trying to detect any signs of Soviet nuclear tests.
So basically, Cold War paranoia in the form of high-altitude surveillance.
Pretty much. And, I guess the Air Force figured a crashed alien spacecraft sounded a little less alarming than the truth.
So they went with the cover story.
Hmm.
And it worked. For a while, anyway.
Oh, it definitely worked. I mean, people are still talking about Roswell today.
Right. Even though we know it wasn't aliens. It's amazing how a good story can take on a life of its own.
Speaking of good stories, this next one involves a literary icon who was convinced he was being watched.
Hold on, are you talking about
Ernest Hemingway.
Hemingway? As in, the sun also rises, Hemingway.
That's the one.
Wow, okay, so what, was he paranoid or something?
Well, according to his friend A.E. Hotchner, Hemingway was absolutely positive that the FBI was spying on him, thought his phones were tapped, his mail was being opened. He even thought they bugged his car.
Well, he wasn't exactly known for being, the most stable guy.
True, but there was more to it than that.
Really? How so?
So in the 1980s, Hemingway's FBI file was declassified.
What did they find?
Well, it turns out his file was over 120 pages long.
120 pages. What could they possibly have on him that would fill 120 pages?
Well, it seems the FBI was particularly interested in his connections to anti-fascist groups and his activities in Cuba.
Ah, I see. J. Edgar Hoover wasn't exactly known for his love of anything even vaguely leftist.
Nope, not at all. So you see, Hemingway's suspicions weren't so far-fetched after all.
Wow. So the guy was right. The FBI really was watching him. Kind of makes you wonder if Big Brother is always watching, doesn't it?
You got it. And that takes us to our final deep dive today. This one takes us back to the 1920s and the story of, get this, leaded gasoline.
Leaded gasoline.
Yeah.
What's so intriguing about that? It's just, gas.
Well, for decades, we were basically pumping poison into our cars and into the air.
We were.
Oh, yeah. And the really crazy part is, they knew it was dangerous back then.
They knew. Like, back in the 1920s, they knew leaded gasoline was harmful.
Yep. See, there was this engineer, Thomas Midgley Jr. He worked for General Motors, and he figured out that adding, get this, tetraethyl lead, they called it TLL to gasoline, it stopped engine knocking.
Okay. And knocking is bad, right?
Right. But here's the thing. TLL, it was already known to be super toxic.
So they knew it was poisonous, but used it anyway. Why would they do that?
Well, they had other options, like ethanol, but they couldn't patent it.
Ah, so they went with the option that would make them the most money, even though it was harmful. Classic.
It happens all too often, right?
Yeah.
And there was this DuPont executive back in 1922, and he actually called T-tel very poisonous in an internal memo.
But they just, ignored that.
Pretty much. And it took decades for the real cost of using leaded gasoline to become clear. We're talking widespread health problems, especially in kids. Lead poisoning is really dangerous, especially for children.
So when did they finally ban leaded gasoline?
It took a while, but finally in 1996, it was banned in the U.S.
1996? That doesn't seem that long ago.
I know, right? And even though it's been banned for a while now, the effects of using it for all those years, well, they haven't gone away.
Wow, that's a lot to process. It's kind of terrifying when you think about it. All those everyday things that we think are safe, could actually be harming us.
It makes you think twice about what you believe and who you can trust.
It really does. Well, on that note, that wraps up our deep dive into conspiracy theories that turned out to be true. From big pharma cover-ups to ancient artifact smuggling, government secrets, and even animal spies. We've covered it all.
And the thing is, these are just a few examples. There are so many more out there.
It just goes to show sometimes the truth is even stranger and more unsettling than fiction.
And often it's those uncomfortable truths that have the power to change the world if we're willing to listen.
That's a great point. So to our listeners, keep asking questions, keep digging for the truth, and never be afraid to dive deep into the unknown. And who knows, maybe you'll uncover the next conspiracy theory that turns out to be true.
Until next time, stay curious.